Sorry, chapter 14, verse 34. When you came into the land of Canaan, which I gave to you for a possession, and I put the plague of leprosy in a house of the land of your possession. And then it talks about calling the priest. 36, and the priest shall command that they empty the house, so everything had to be taken out of the house before the priest go in to see the plague. That all that be in the house be not made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go and see the house. 37, and he shall look on the plague, and behold, if the plague be in the walls of the house with hollow strakes, greenish or reddish. What does that remind you of? Yes, it certainly does. And then it says in 39, if it be spread in the walls, and number 40, the priest shall command that the stones be taken away that had the plague in it, and they be cast into an unclean place in the city. So they were considered unclean, taken out. And 41, and they shall cause the house to be scraped within and without, and they pour that dust out to an unclean place out of the city. They shall take other stones, put them in their place, in the other stones, and mortar, and shall plaster the house. 43, and if the plague come again and break out in the house, after that the stones have been taken away, and after he has scraped the house, and after it is plastered, then shall the priest come and look at it, and behold, if the plague be spread in the house, it is a fretting leprosy in the house, it is unclean, and he shall break down the house. Did you see that? The whole thing had to be destroyed. The stones, the timber, the mortar. Everything had to be taken out of the city. And if you look down to 57, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy. And there is another, and I won't read of that because of time, but it also talks about leprosy in the clothes and in the warp and the weft, if there be a greenish or a reddish strakes it calls it. What does that sound like? Sounds like mould again. Now, in the New International Version, when looking at leprosy in the house, it's called mildew. When looking at leprosy in the clothes, it's called mildew. It's the same word used in leprosy of the skin. So what should leprosy in the skin be called? Mildew on the skin. But in the New International Version, it's called an infectious skin disease. Now, the medical term for mould or fungus is myco. I'll draw it up on the board. So the medical term for mould is myco. And if you can get your hands on a medical dictionary and look up all the mycos, you would be shocked to find there are about 3 pages showing the mould link with a whole heap of disease, pneumonia, skin disease. They are all linked to mould. Now what I want to do is have a look at this little microorganism, because that's what it is. It can only be seen under a microscope. And the reason why all the stones had to be destroyed is because you cannot destroy mould. You can boil it for hours, you can use caustic soda on it, nothing can destroy that hard outer case that is around the spore of mould. It is so highly toxic. Now, it was recognised as such in the Bible, wasn't it? Because it had to be destroyed. The house had to be destroyed. And the clothes had to be destroyed. Now, what is it? Well, I'm going to go into this microscopic world now of microorganisms. A microorganism is a tiny little plant-like creature. It is actually not plant and it is not animal. They actually haven't got a specific standing for it because it's a little bit like both. And these microorganisms in our body, some are bacteria, some are viruses, some are fungus, some are molds, Some are yeast. They can only be seen under a microscope. But they are not all dangerous. In fact, most of them are incredibly helpful, and God put them on the planet for a reason. There are 70 trillion cells in our body, but there are to the 10th or to the 7th amount of microorganisms in our body. Does that mean we're more plant than animal? The largest amount of these microorganisms is found in the gastrointestinal tract. Now, inside every cell of the body, you'll find little microorganisms, and they are an important part of the proper running of the cell, the building up of the body. Now, at the same time of Louis Pasteur, there was a contemporary called Antoine Béchamp. Antoine Béchamp was a master, 6 times professor. Pasteur was a chemist. How come we haven't heard about Antoine Béchamp? Not a popular theory. Antoine Béchamp stated that when the body is working well, these little microorganisms are an important part of its running. But whenever cell damage or cell death comes into the human organisms, these little microorganisms have the ability to change roles. Pardon?
Mutate.
To mutate, to change roles, or even to evolve into other forms. Now, we do it all the time. I'm sure no one here is dressed now the way they were dressed last night. No? We had our sleeping attire on last night. Why? Because it was the night. I was dressed a little bit differently when I went on my morning walk. At home, if in my garden, I'm dressed a little differently. The environment dictates the change. Am I right? We also change all through life. We start off as babies, then toddlers, then children, then adolescent, then teenagers, then 20s, middle age, older age. We change all through life. So this basic change is a basic law of life, and it is exactly the same with these little microorganisms. Whenever cell damage comes into the human body, these little microorganisms take off their suit clothes, so to speak, and put their rubber gloves on. They become the clean-up team. That's the bacteria. We had a microbiologist do our program, and he said, oh, I call them the garbage collectors, because that's what they are. We use the name garbage in Australia. We never use the word trash. I notice here, I saw a bag that said trash bags. We never say that in Australia. We just say garbage. So garbage collectors. They're the garbage collectors, a very important role on the planet. In fact, if it wasn't for these guys, there'd be so much rubbish on planet Earth we wouldn't even be able to walk on the planet. Am I right? If a cow dies in the paddock, what takes it away? The little microorganisms that were an important part in the growth and the running of the cow, what happens to them now? The organism is dead. Now they must change roles. They change into bacteria, yeast and fungus. And then the next stage is mould. And around this time, the matter is brought back to dust. What I have just illustrated here is the carbon cycle. What does the preacher say at the funeral? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. He's referring to Genesis 3:19 that says we came from dust, we go back to dust, and then it says we're dust. And Psalm 103 says he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. That's why it's so important to be a gardener and know your garden, because that's where we come from. And the little microorganisms that are an important part of the running of the body, do you know they're also in the soil? They play an important role in the soil. Yeast and fungus, they have a nickname too. They're the undertakers. What do undertakers do?